I was finally stopped by one more drop-off, this one at least 300 feet. I peered off into the distance. It was smooth hiking from there to town. I looked down and sighed. There was no ode to joy playing in my head at this moment, as I let out a loud barbaric yelp. I just don't have enough rope. This is the Long Journey Podcast with Jason Jamar, detailing my travels across America as I share thrilling stories from my 16-month backpacking trek from California to Maine and my 8-month kayak voyage from Maine to Texas. Day 9, September 28th, 1999. Elevation, 1,430 feet. Sunrise, 6:42 a.m., sunset, 6:31 p.m. Moon phase, last quarter. Location, Aguanga, California. I enjoyed visiting the Kuntzes in Aguanga, and I was very thankful for their hospitality. It was a remarkable change from a couple days before. The next day, David brought me back to the general store, and I set off again. I started up Highway 371 towards Highway 74. A few miles down the road, a lady stopped and gave me a bottle of water with a couple of Snickers taped to it. I suspected Dave had sent them with instructions to look for me along the road. It was these little acts of kindness that made life so great. 20 miles later, I reached the intersection of Highway 371 and Highway 74 at nearly 5,000 feet above sea level. I had left a cache of food and supplies at a realtor's office, Bill Walters Realty Company. When I met Bill on my supply drop run, he said I could leave it in the well house behind his office. I was glad that it was there where I had left it. Bill wasn't around, so I picked up my supplies and left a thank you note. I continued on the Pines to Palms Highway, otherwise known as Highway 74. A mile past Bill's office, east on Highway 74, the Pacific Crest Trail crosses the road. I decided to hike up the trail away from the road and find a place to camp. I met a couple of day hikers headed back to the parking area. They gave me an extra drink that they had left over. I tucked it away to savor with supper, thinking something other than water might be a nice change. The following day, I got an early start and stopped for breakfast about 8 miles down the road. There was a small cafe across the street from a fire and ranger station. I stopped in and visited with the park ranger for a few moments. I told him of my intention to hike down Highway 74, but from what I could tell from my map, it looked extremely steep, with a lot of switchbacks, and I was curious if there might be an easier way down the mountain, a shortcut apart from the treacherous road. He said there was a pass that made a straighter shot. However, he wasn't exactly sure where it was. We studied the map on the wall in his office for a few moments, scouting possible locations. I had an idea where it might be. I thanked him and stepped across the street for breakfast. During breakfast, I continued to review my road map, looking for a shortcut down the mountain. You burn tons of calories backpacking daily, and I ordered a Western omelet. I was glad this place didn't skimp on the portion sizes. While enjoying my omelet and pondering my route, I couldn't help but to think of the Robert Frost poem, The Road Not Taken. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. This in turn reminded me of the movie Dead Poets Society. I enjoyed this movie so much as a teenager. Robin Williams as Mr. Keating was incredibly inspiring. I also stood on my desk more than once in my Computer Science 2 class in high school. You're welcome, Mr. Crouch. In an early scene, the class gets its introduction to Mr. Keating, with the students in a hallway studying a trophy case filled with class photos of boys who had graduated years before. Mr. Keating whispers, "Carpe diem. Seize the day, boys. Make your lives extraordinary." My spirits lifted and my imagination soared. while somberly being reminded of the fragile nature of life, our free agency should be well spent. Sort of like this trip, to quote Walt Whitman, my own barbaric yelp, as I stood on the mountaintops of Southern California. I paid for breakfast and started down the mountain. I wondered if I would find a shorter pass or if I was doomed to take Highway 74. Either way, this would be a long day, yet my goal remained the same, to be in a hotel that night, eating a giant pizza, and not sleeping in the mountains. I reached the scenic outlook on Highway 74 at 2,400 feet with all the switchbacks. You'd swear a child with a spirograph designed this road. I pined for a passage that would take me to Palm Springs without using Highway 74. I was nervous hiking down this section of the road because most of it would be blind curves in both directions. The thought of walking outside the guardrails with steep sides and jagged uneven terrain did not appeal to me or my ankles. So I was left to walk on the non-existent shoulder, hoping and praying that the traffic would see me. A half-mile past the scenic outlook, I found a pass that looked like a shortcut to town and would allow me to bypass the road altogether. Cacti and sharp rocks were everywhere, but it did seem like a decent path. It was as though the skies parted and the light shone down from the heavens to show me the Holy Grail. You could see the city of Palm Desert in the distance. Now, what did I do with my coconut shells? A quarter mile in, I came to a slight drop-off, perhaps 10 feet, just enough that you didn't want to jump, but not so high as to be intimidating. I took off my backpack, pulled out my 100 feet of parachute cord, and attached it to my pack, so that I could lower it down. I climbed down and loaded up again, neatly packing my parachute cord away. And about another quarter mile, another drop-off, this time a couple of feet farther down. No problem. I took my pack off, pulled out the parachute cord and tied it on, and lowered it down gently. Once again, I climbed down and continued. At about the same distance, another drop-off, this time closer to 20 to 25 feet down. I removed my pack. I pulled out the parachute cord and attached it again, and lowered my backpack again, and then climbed down again. This time I left the cord attached to my pack and just tucked the excess into a side pocket, since it appeared to me that a pattern was developing here. I was right. The next iteration was not nearly as far till the next drop-off, and even farther down than the last. I took off my pack, the parachute cord already attached, and lowered it down, accidentally dropping at the last 10 feet. I carefully climbed down, hoisted my backpack, still leaving the parachute cord attached, and began seriously questioning my life choices. If you're going to take the road less traveled, make sure it is a road first. Once again, I proceeded down the shortcut, and I was finally stopped by one more drop-off, this one at least 300 feet. I peered into the distance, and it was smooth hiking from there to town. I looked down and sighed. There was no ode to joy playing in my head at this moment, as I let out a loud, barbaric yelp. I just don't have enough rope. So now I would have to find a way back up to the road. I knew I would not be able to get back the way that I came down. I began hiking toward where I was sure the road would eventually be. It was hard, treacherous terrain. I had to make my way down one side and up another side of a valley before finally reaching pavement. Then, the road. I had a backpack covered in cactus thorns, and I had only maybe knocked off a mile or two from the highway. And it took all afternoon. By then, it was sunset. I was exhausted. I'd been walking since 5:30 that morning. Now, I just wanted a shower, a large pizza, and a warm bed off that stinking mountain. You have to go gingerly down the road with a steep grade such as this, especially with a 100-pound pack on your back. You'd be surprised how much work it can be going down a steep hill versus going up one. So to get down as quickly as I could, not following the previous sage advice, I tripped, tore my pants, and scraped up my knee as I tumbled head over heels. I must have looked like a turtle shell from Super Mario Brothers. The rest of the evening passed very slowly, for I hobbled along with a busted knee and utter fatigue. I reached the very outskirts of Palm Desert with a gated community on my left. I limped to the guard shack and asked if I could use the phone. At this point, I did not have a cell phone. I was not going to walk another step. I wasn't camping outside a gated community in the city limits. I was getting that shower and pizza and warm bed. I called a taxi and got a ride to the nearest Best Western in Indio, about 10 miles away. Despite being after 11 p.m., I had a pizza delivered once I got settled into my room. Ah, the little things in life. After that day, the word shortcut has been seared into my brain to mean the vilest, most evil incarnation of torture ever designed. So step back, evil dentist torturer from Alias. I still get a slight tick if I hear the word shortcut. Day 15. Date, October 4th, 1999. Elevation, 13 feet below sea level. Sunrise, 6:41 a.m., sunset, 6:26 p.m. Moon phase, waning crescent. Location, Indio, California. I decided to rest a couple of days in Indio before tackling the next big challenge, crossing the Colorado Desert on foot. There are 3 desert regions in California. The first is the Great Basin, otherwise known as the High Desert, usually in an elevation of 4,000 feet plus, and receiving a good deal of winter. The next is the Mojave, around 2,000 feet in elevation. Then last but certainly not least is the Colorado Desert. This is an extension of the Sonoran Desert of Mexico and Arizona. Much of it lies at or below sea level, one of North America's hottest, driest areas. I was incredibly thankful to my host Daniel Martinez for showing me the town. Daniel was the manager of the Best Western I stayed at once I finished my trek down the mountains. Once he heard what I was doing and taking a day off, he offered to show me some of the local attractions. He took me out to see the Oasis at the Coachella Valley Preserve. Here I was able to see an endangered fish, the desert pupfish. They are tiny, slightly blue or silver-colored fish. The fact that out here in the middle of the desert with an oasis with fish was pretty wild. The oasis is fed by water that seeps out of the San Andreas Fault. Inside the oasis, amongst all the California fan palms, the temperature was 15 to 20 degrees cooler. Trust me, you could feel the difference, since it was well over 100 degrees outside. Also found in the preserve is the Coachella Valley Fringe-Toed Lizard. The Coachella Valley Fringe-Toed Lizard, or Uma inornata. They get their name, of course, from elongated scales on the toes of their hind feet that look like fringes. These fringes act like miniature snowshoes, giving the lizards extra traction to speed away from predators on the loose sand surface. The lizards also have fringes on their ears to keep sand away from their eardrums. They could have just as easily been called fringed ear lizards. The lizard's head is perfectly shaped to allow them to dive head first into the soft sand, actually swimming below the sand's surface. This behavior allows the lizards to disappear into the dune, leaving no trace behind and effectively evading all predators. Once below the sand, the lizards' noses are equipped with a structure that allows the lizards to continue to breathe air without bringing sand into their lungs. These adaptations provide the fringe-toed lizards with everything they need to live on the dunes. It was a wonderful day of sightseeing. I was grateful that Daniel took his day off to show me around town. Late that afternoon, he dropped me off at a truck stop not far from the Best Western. I ate an early supper, rested until the sun went down, and began the next section. This time of year should have been in the upper 80s and lower 90s. Instead, it had been in the hundreds every day. To beat the heat, I intended to hike by night through the desert. This idea, however, was soon to change. Once outside of town, I needed a light, and found my flashlight didn't work. Both bulbs and a change of batteries made no difference. The fall my pack took off a cliff a couple of days prior must have shortened its lifespan. I would not be put off. I was going to keep trekking, and there was just enough ambient light that the path before me was dimly visible. Not long after this, I heard a distinctive, agitated, rattling sound. If you've grown up anywhere in rattlesnake country, you know this sound and you will never forget it. It was dark, so I could not see him. However, I was mighty obliged to him for his cordial introduction. It was very neighborly. Without the aid of a light, I immediately halted, acutely pinpointed the sound, and gave him wide berth. We parted on excellent terms. I let him keep his territory, and he allowed me the illusion that I had the power to do so. I was glad I wore my 16-inch all-leather snake boots. This encounter was the primary reason I had written to Wesco about their boots in the first place. I carefully tread and attentively listened with each step for the rest of the night. The stars were brilliant, despite some of the light pollution from nearby Palm Springs and Indio. I covered another few miles before finding a suitable place to camp. Day 16, October 5th, 1999. Elevation 1,200 feet. Sunrise 6:42 a.m., sunset 6:24 p.m. Moon phase, waning crescent. Location, 8 miles east of Indio, California, in the middle of the desert south of Interstate 10. I broke camp early. I soon made the Cactus City rest stop, and I indeed did just that. After refilling my water, I was on my way back into the Colorado desert. Generally, I hiked anywhere from a few hundred yards up to a mile from Interstate 10 while traveling along this section of the desert. I had found a gas pipeline service road paralleling the interstate to walk along. When it was time for a break, or to see where I had stashed water, I took shelter under a bridge below Interstate 10. This day I hiked until the heat was just too much, and then found shelter underneath a bridge over a desert wash, or where all the water runs on the rare occasions it does rain. I napped there until the heat of the day passed. While taking refuge from the heat, I noticed a vast group of turkey vultures, 100 or more, circling in the air. Did you know that a group of buzzards roosting is called a wake, and a group of buzzards in a flight are referred to as a kettle? I had never seen that many buzzards or turkey vultures together at one time. What was it that they knew that I didn't? Was this some sort of foreshadowing? Were they taking bets on me like a Far Side cartoon? I was hoping they were not waiting for my wake. At 5:30 p.m., I was off again. I needed to make a few more miles before having to stop for lack of a flashlight. I made camp under another bridge under the interstate. I made a small fire for light, and then later to cook my supper. I was pleased with the available space and quickly set up camp. The wood for burning in the desert lacks in quality, but this is only surpassed by its lack of quantity. I continuously scouted for more wood to keep the fire going. Chili was on the menu. I only carried a few canned items because of their weight, so this was a treat. I placed the whole can of chili in the fire and let it cook for a few minutes before taking it out to cool. I ate my chili right out of the can. I then read by candlelight for a while. I was reading Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. There is something to be said about reading this book by candlelight, alone, in the middle of the desert, surrounded by a sea of sand and rock. as opposed to the ocean. I could almost put myself in the story. I found calm and peace in the wilderness. I felt very blessed and thanked God. The wind had started to pick up, so reading by candlelight was no longer feasible. I was going to have to get another flashlight soon. The wind continued to increase and was exceptionally windy all through the night. Day 18, October 7th, 1999. Elevation, 656 feet. Moon phase, waning crescent. Sunrise 6:40 a.m., sunset 6:17 p.m. Location, Desert Center, California. I arrived at Scirocco Summit for lunch about 27 miles east of Indio and 19 miles west of Desert Center. Today, the wind was a force to be reckoned with. There were times when the gust actually pushed me over. I must have looked like the fellow from the V8 commercials. I stopped in at the General George S. Patton Museum and Memorial. It was fascinating and educational. The War Department commissioned Patton to create a desert training center in California in March of 1942, preparing troops to battle the Nazis in North Africa. The museum is located where Camp Young used to be. It once was the headquarters for General Patton's 3rd Armored Division. Camp Young closed before the war was finished, but it covered 18,000 square miles and saw the training of nearly 1 million troops. I took advantage of the local postal facilities and sent some postcards home. I then rested and ate at the little cafe they have. This place has been open since August 15, 1933, when the US 60 highway was put through. Now it still stands and is still powered by a generator. While taking a break inside and enjoying the atmosphere, I ate and read Robinson Crusoe. Sinatra sang Mac the Knife on the jukebox, and I seem to remember Old Blue Eyes was on repeat. I made it to my first water cache 17 miles east of Desert Center, with only 51 miles to the next place to get water. You'd be surprised how far a gallon of water goes towards hygiene, and there's plenty of privacy in the desert. I had stored 4 gallons of water there the month previous. With the extra water, I could resupply my water containers and cook a full meal. Rice-a-roni, broccoli au gratin. The little camp stove that I carried had a battery-operated fan built into the bottom, increasing combustion for a hotter fire so that you could cook with just twigs. I soon departed there and made another 3 miles after dark, having bought another flashlight at Scirocco Summit. This put me over 20 miles that day. During the last 3 miles, I had the pleasure of meeting another friendly snake, a sidewinder. I was about 6 to 8 feet from him when he said, "Hello." I, of course, took defensive posture alpha, froze in my tracks, located the source of that all too recognizable noise, and soon spotted him with the aid of my new flashlight. I then took the opportunity to take a photo. I thought it was only fair since he was so courteous. After a couple more miles, I then made camp check-in to ensure that there were no more snakes in the immediate area. I have enjoyed my time out here. It sort of reminded me of reading T.R. The Last Romantic. The night sky is truly one to behold. Plus, I polished off Robinson Crusoe. It ended all too soon. Day 21, October 10th, 1999. Elevation 370 feet. Moon phase, waning crescent. Sunrise 6:39 a.m., sunset 6:11 p.m. Location, approximately 18 miles west of Blythe, California, in the middle of the desert. In the Marine Corps, we would sing cadences during long hikes to pass the time and keep everyone moving together cohesively. Not the fast-paced running ones, we did plenty of that too, but slower rhythm cadences. The signal to let everyone know to start was the command, "Turn the radio on." Your morale improved when the songs began. Hiking through the desert comes with its own unique circumstances. The sunrises and sunsets are spectacular. Everything in between can be a challenge. I will say that there are many things to see and more wildlife in the desert than you would ever expect. However, the scenery doesn't change a great deal, and it can get a little bit monotonous. So now hiking all day, every day, My radio turned on frequently. This day, the radio was on the fritz. It kept changing dials. First, I was humming the William Tell Overture. Then my mind raced to a hymn for my youth, Unto Thee, O Lord. Not to be outdone and nothing really in common, my mind's radio dial switched yet again to the country channel. George Strait's Amarillo by Morning, and then Western movie soundtracks, Bandolero, Lonesome Dove, and Legends of the Fall. Not long afterward, the channel switched again to the John Williams Hour. The Empire Strikes Back Imperial March, the theme to Indiana Jones. I probably hummed these two tunes for the next couple of miles. Click, the dial changed again to what I can only classify as weird walking songs. I would walk 500 miles by the Proclaimers and Circles by the band Soul Coughing. Of course, both of these stick with you for a while, so at least another mile or two down. Then, most of U2's Joshua Tree album played through my head, especially Where the Streets Have No Name. This seemed appropriate since I was only a couple miles from the Joshua Tree National Park. Then, the classical hour again, with Ravel's Bolero. This only lasted a while before the channel switched to Smashing Pumpkins, 1979. The heat must have been getting to me, or maybe I hadn't drunk enough water, because it was just crazy. An old El Paso Picante sauce commercial from the 90s, a parody of the Village People's Macho Man. Nacho Man, I've got to be a Nacho Man. Only to be surpassed by Little Bunny Foo Foo. I have no idea where Little Bunny Foo Foo came from, but it drove me nuts to have this song in my head over and over and over. I had to think of something else. So Weird Al's Achy Breaky song filled in nicely. The day ended with the whistling theme to the movie Bridge over the River Kwai, or the Colonel Bogey March. I hope you enjoyed my random playlist that helped me pass one of the long desert hiking days. Next time on the Long Journey Podcast, Arizona, Here I Come. And I awakened to the shrill howling and yipping of coyotes nearby. I looked at my watch. It was 2:52 a.m. Having grown up in Texas, hearing coyotes wasn't new. Yet this night was even more ominous. They were highly vexed about something, and the noise was eerie. They went on for a few moments, and then silence. Deafening silence. Suddenly, the ground began to shake. I sat up quickly and tried to get my bearings. I knew I was in the open, but I still looked up to ensure that nothing was about to fall on top of me. What is going on? Off in the distance, I could see cars on the interstate start to swerve. You can find more details about the Long Journey Podcast at JourneyLong.com. And be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your platform of choice. Thank you, and may you journey long.